everybody, I'm Kent. I'm an alcoholic. I don't think I spoke in front of this many people in years. My date of sobriety is August 19th, 1983, and my home group is the Roving Stags. And the first thing that I like to say is that it's a privilege to be back at the Alumni House. This is where it all started for me, as a matter of fact. And I'll explain that later. But during the next 12 weeks, I'll be sharing my experience, strength, and hope with you. And most of what I'm going to share with you has been passed down to me. So anything that you think that I'm giving you with any great wisdom has certainly come from people that has passed it down to me, and I'm just passing it down to you. Speaking of people before me, I was really impressed with Spike Mike's version of the steps, and I thought he did an awesome job. And it's certainly hard to follow a guy like that. And, another thing that really always impresses me is somebody that gets up and does the steps without any notes. I can't do that. As you see, I got tons of notes. I'm going to be bringing in stuff like this. I bring in all kinds of props. Some of them are pretty silly. Some of them are stupid. No matter what it is. And there's a reason why I do that. I want to bring home a point. I want you to remember what I'm trying to say. And if just one person out of the next 12 weeks will remember one silly thing that I did during the next 12 weeks before they pick up a drink or a drug, then all the silliness and, and some of it's embarrassing. It's not easy to be up here, no matter, even though I've been doing this since 96, still nerve-wracking, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober and help other people to do that. Speaking of Spike Mike, we both came into AA. I want to set this off right now. I want you to understand that my date of sobriety is 1983. But I didn't go to AA, I didn't get a sponsor, I didn't do it for 13 years. So in 83, I went to a treatment center, but in 1996, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. Now I'm coming off a long, dry drunk. Nobody likes me. I don't like them. I'm trying to save my marriage. I'm judgmental. I'm just one angry individual, and I show up at the Java Club, and there's Spike Mike sitting there. Now, we called him Spike Mike for a reason. He had 3 or 4 inch hair that was that long, and he looked like, one of those cats that you stick their tail in an outlet, and their hair just kind of goes like this. That's exactly what he looked like. And I remember sitting at that table, and I was saying to myself, man, this guy looks like he just crawled out from under a bridge. And later on, he told me he did. We were both desperate men in our own way. He may have been coming off of a wet drunk, and I was coming off my dry drunk. But little did both of us realize that God had a plan for both of us. We each got to see the light come on in each of our eyes. I've watched him grow in sobriety, and he's watched me grow. And I'll tell you what, I find it so amazing. Watching somebody grow in Alcoholics Anonymous is like watching a child grow to an adult. And it's such a rewarding feeling to just have any part of that. Just, when I see a guy that comes in from under a bridge to where Mike is today, that's a miracle. That's a miracle. And, people say the same thing about me. And I know that there are people in this meeting tonight that were at my very first men's meeting. And I can tell you right now that I am not the same man that was in that meeting. I'd like to dedicate this series of steps to Belinda Hanan. She went through Alumni House several years ago. She was a young lady who tragically died of this disease last week. And I watched her struggle for the past 10 years to try to get something going for herself. And I saw her at her best when she left Alumni House and got a sponsor and was doing the deal. And for one reason or other, she fell by that wayside. and I don't wish for Belinda's death to go in vain. I just want, she truly died an alcoholic's death. Her own family can't scrape up enough money to come to Florida to even see, to have her memorial. They don't have enough money to bury her, and they're taking donations. And if anybody is interested in any of that, you can see me after the meeting. But I don't want her death to go unnoticed. And with that, that falls right in line with the first step. And without the first step in smashing the very idea that we can safely drink again, we're going to end up in jails, institutions, or death. I see people go to jail. I say, well, at least they got another shot at sobriety. My daughter, we were estranged for a long time, and I didn't see her for 2 years. She was out there. And all of a sudden, one day she called me up. She was in jail. And I said, and she wanted me to come get her. I said, hell no. I said, at least I know you're going to get 3 square meals a day, you got a roof over your head, and you're going to stay sober. I said, so I left her there. And she had another shot at sobriety. Somebody says to me, they call me up, I'm in Gateway, I'm in detox. Well, there's an institution. Good for you. You got one more shot. Then why are we so shocked when people say you're not going to hear about Belinda? She's dead. She died. You know why that's so shocking? Because it's permanent. There will be no more chances. There'll be no more jails. There'll be no more institutions. It's permanent. No more recovery. And I have seen so many people since 1996 go out one more time. I watched a guy celebrate his 1 year anniversary. He went out there that night and got himself killed. That one night. Probably thought, I'm going to celebrate, I'll start again tomorrow. We all say that, but we all have that one more drunk left in us, but we don't know if we got one more recovery. I want to say this at the onset, I probably have a little more time than most of you, but we're all the same distance to the next drink of drunk. And that's pretty much how I feel about sobriety and sharing. I'm up here for me. And I'm just a messenger. I was telling Malka tonight that I started doing this because I made the mistake of telling my sponsor that I was bored in Alcoholics Anonymous. So you can see where that got me. I didn't make it here in one white chip. Actually, I never picked one up. I usually up north, I'm from Massachusetts, you can tell I'm not a Florida native, but I usually went to a meeting stoned. And after the meeting, I usually got drunk. And as a matter of fact, the guy that brought me to my very first AA meeting, I met him in a blackout. He wasn't drinking at the bar, but he was talking to me. And in a blackout, I agreed to go to an AA meeting with him. And so the next day, he showed up at my house, and I'm wondering what he wanted. And he said, we're going to a meeting. What kind of a meeting? He says, an AA meeting. So now, I want you to understand this. The only meeting that I know about was from high school, where you got a president, a vice president, the treasurer, somebody takes notes, and at the end of when they talk, you vote on something. That's all I knew. So I'm stuck now. This guy's already at my house, so I go with him. We smoke a joint on the way to the meeting, and so we sit in there, and I'm sitting down, and the guy does some reading, and somebody did something, and then he goes, does anybody want to share? And I'm saying to myself, everybody starts talking about their drinking days. And I'm saying to myself, so when's the meeting supposed to start? and they're all talking, and they're just talking about themselves. And I said to the guy that brought me, I said, when's the meeting start? And he started laughing. He goes, this is the meeting. And I couldn't get it. I said, maybe at the end of the meeting we're going to vote on who has the best story. I didn't get it. I went to every AA meeting. It was in 1979, and my date of sobriety is in 83. So you can see that I went through a lot of AA meetings. And one day I went up to this guy, and I asked him, I said, how do I even know I need AA? He said, let me ask you a question. He says, are you willing to do whatever it takes to get sober? Well, I wasn't stupid. I'm thinking about that. Anything? I said, well, it depends. He goes, wrong answer. You're not ready. And he walked away from me. And I got ticked off because I wanted him to give me some kind of an explanation. Well, he didn't. He walked away. I left kind of ticked off. But looking back, he was absolutely right. If I had to answer that question with it all depends, I'm truly not ready. You know, just like with Belinda's death, we have to be as teachable as only the dying can be. That's what we have to be. As teachable as the dying can be. And it would take me another 4 years to be that teachable. Matter of fact, the guy that brought me to the AA meeting, my first AA meeting, he was an interesting fellow. He spent 5 years in prison for armed robbery at a bank in New York City in a blackout. He spent 5 years in prison. He's telling about it. He said the only way that they got to prove it to him that it was him, they showed him the tapes from the bank. He said, yeah, that was me. I said, you spent 5 years in prison, you don't even remember anything you did. He goes, yeah, that sucks. You know, it would be nice to say that I came into AA in 1983, got a sponsor, did the steps, and lived happily ever after. But I didn't do that. You know, I didn't get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, but however, AA planted the seed that drinking and drugging may have some part in the problems in my life. I got sober at Spofford Hall, New Hampshire. Someone told me that I'd be a nice guy if I just didn't drink. They were wrong. I left Spofford Hall clean and sober. And I didn't need a sponsor, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna bring you up to how I got to do the steps, and I'm gonna back up a little bit. Now I want to tell you on the onset that I'm gonna run out of time before I'm gonna run out of material, but that's okay because the steps don't end on a dot. The steps blend with each other, and that's exactly how I do present the steps. My step 1 will blend right into step 2, and I may finish up step 1 next week and go into 2, and somewhere between now and step 12, it'll all come together. And pretty much, that's the hope. Anyway, I didn't get a sponsor right away. Now, a lot of you are from Gateway and treatment centers and halfway houses. You're going to understand what I'm going to tell you. I was in Spofford Hall for 6 weeks. I loved those people. I literally loved them more than my own family. I cried with them. I laughed with them. I told them about my innermost secrets. Man, they loved me when I couldn't love myself, and I didn't want to leave. My caseworker, Beverly, says to me, she says, no. She says, you go to AA, because you're going to meet people just like you met here, and they're going to love you just like we did. So I said, well, I doubt that. So she said, well, we set you up with a program. Here's the whole program right here. You're to meet your sponsor this time, tomorrow night, da-da-da. I'm there. This old guy picks me up. He's about my age that I am now. There's 3 old guys in this car. And I'm sitting in the back seat. Now, I want to get this right out of the way, but I got a point, okay? I'm sitting in the back seat, and I says to the guy that's driving, who's my sponsor, I says, hey, man, they told me that I got to call you every night. I said, what do you think of that? And he looks in the mirror with a cigar, and he goes, in a pig's ass, you will. And the 3 guys, they all start cracked up laughing. I want you to know right now, there went 6 weeks of treatment right out the window. You want to know why? Because he flunked my test. Sure, they told me that I'm going to meet people that love me and care for me in AA. But no, the first guy that I meet, don't get me wrong now, I didn't want to call him. Chances are I wouldn't have called him, but I wanted to meet a guy that would love me enough and care about me enough to want me to call him every day on a daily basis. So right off the bat, I said, you know what? I'll never meet people like I did at Spofford Hall. It's a fellowship, it's a love, it's a bond. We're all on the Titanic. That's how I felt, and we'll all go down together. So that one guy, I threw AA, the sponsorship, and the whole program right out the window. I had done steps 1, 2, and 3 in treatment, and I said, you know what? I'll just ask God to keep me sober one day at a time. And that's what I did for the next 13 years. There are a lot of ways to get sober. Mine is just one of them, and you decide which way is the easier, softer way. You know, after treatment, this is my first year of sobriety. I went to a few AA meetings. They were boring. I really justified not going. I said, why do I need to go to AA? Now I'm clean and sober. And after all, everybody said, you know, you're clean and sober. You're a nice guy now. Well, you know what? I left Massachusetts before they could see Kent not drinking. Now, Kent not drinking, 6 months into my new life, I got a divorce. I quit my job. I headed to Florida with a new woman and her baby girl and my 12-year-old son. And here I am. I hit Jacksonville, Florida. And the first place I go to, I find that it wasn't the very first place I went to. It was like the 19th place I went to. I happened to be a jogger, and I'd be running by the Java Club, and lo and behold, I ended up going once. And I gave a guy my name and number there, and I left. Now, Payne got me into treatment in 1983, and Payne got me into Alcoholics Anonymous in 1996. And in 1990, I married that woman that I came down to Jacksonville with, and during the next 13 years, trust me, I ran that poor woman through the mill. I was not a likable guy. I was a man. I was an angry, resentful, bitter young man. That's what I was. They used to call me Bronson because I had that stoic look. I never smiled. You wouldn't know if I was going to punch you, hit you, or hug you. And my kids were the same way. When I walked through that door, they didn't know if Dad was going to be in a loving mood or whether he was going to kill us. And my behavior did not change in sobriety. But in 1996, my wife told me she wanted a divorce, and I figured divorce, pain, drinking, and then my sister, who was in Al-Anon forever, she said to me, you know, you missed something in AA. You missed the spiritual side of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I didn't want to hear that, but I didn't want a divorce either. So I said, all right, I'll go. What do I got to lose? So I came in, and I went to the Java Club, and they all told me to go to the men's meeting. Now, my first men's meeting was a trip. I'm going to tell you, it was a trip for me. I didn't know you had to even speak when you first get there. I just wanted to slip in the door, shut my mouth, and slip out, you know. I just want to see what it's all about. But these guys, they wanted you to say your name and your date of sobriety. Well, hell, 13 years is a long time to remember a date. You know, I don't know what the hell I did 13 years ago on what day it was. And so they all came around to me, and I gave my name, and I'm trying to think about my date of sobriety. And I hesitated a little too long for them, and they said, well, keep coming back. And oh man, I got a little, I'm serious, I got a little hot under the collar. I'm saying to myself, I know that they say that to newcomers. I'm not a newcomer. Hell no, I got 13 years. So as they blew by me, I'm steaming. I'm sitting there. And I'm saying to myself, I'll get this date by the time they get through with all these guys. So they get through with all the guys, and sure enough, I said, I remember, August 19, 83. All right? And then they said, does anybody have a problem staying sober? Huh. I didn't have a problem staying sober, but I had a problem with these guys. So I raised my hand. And I'm telling them, I said, you know, guys, I don't want to make sure that you know that, I'm not a newbie. I got 13 years under my belt. And by the way, my date of sobriety is August 19, 1983. Right then and there, the chairperson says to me, it was Ray Detzer, Ray D, anyway. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And he says to me, I just got one question to ask you. Why are you at this meeting tonight? Well, I didn't expect anybody to actually talk to me. I didn't go to this meeting required to answer a question. And I'll tell you, it was like a slap in the face. And I said to myself, why am I here? And everything went silent. You could hear a pin drop. And I told him I got no friends. My wife wants a divorce. Nobody likes me. My boss wants to fire me. But I got sobriety from 83. And they said, you know what you need? You need a personality change. And I started laughing. I said, yeah, like anybody can do that. And they said, well, you keep coming back and we'll show you how. Well, I took them up on the challenge. That's exactly what it was to me. It was a challenge. I said, all right. I said, I know how I was. I was not a nice guy. And I said to myself, everybody said I needed a complete attitude adjustment. And I said to myself, I'll do this for a while. And if I don't change, I'm going to go to the biggest AA meeting, stand up, and say you're all full of shit. That was the plan. That was the plan. But they told me to get a sponsor. And you know how I got a sponsor? I didn't ask them. I prayed for one. I didn't ask for anything in AA. I've been a loner my entire life. And I used to pray to God all the time because when you're a loner, you don't have any friends. And somebody told me one time, if you accept Jesus, you'll never be alone. And that's what I did. And so I used to talk to him. Well, at this particular time, I leave the men's group, and I said, God, if I'm supposed to do this AA thing, then you have a guy knock on my door, because I am not asking a man to be my sponsor. I'm not asking anybody. Because first of all, I don't trust men, right? I got this bad thing about that. So now 3 days later, I'm at the accessory group. I'm just sitting there minding my own business. A guy walks up to me and goes, hey, I heard you share in the men's group the other day. Do you mind if I make a few suggestions? And I know that sponsors make suggestions. I looked at him, I says, you one of those sponsor guys? He goes, why, you need a sponsor? I said, well, I guess I do. Gave me his card, and he says, call me every night. That's how I got him as a sponsor. During that first year, that guy had me doing all these steps. And he said if I did every one of his suggestions, that I would have a spiritual awakening. Now, I caught it right at the beginning. See, I listened to all these little words, like the fine print. That's what I called it. He said if I do everything. So in other words, if I don't do one little thing that was stupid, and down the road when I don't change, and he says, remember that time I told you to go into the men's meeting, tell them why you don't want to go there anymore? You know, because I didn't want to do that. He said, well, don't do that. You may not get that spiritual awakening. So I wanted to make sure that I did everything. So when it all falls apart, I'm going to say, I did it all. It didn't work on me. Well, I started going to all these meetings. He told me to do a 90 and 90. I started running into guys. I run into a guy, and he'd say, well, hey, who's your sponsor? And I tell him, he said, well, you tell your sponsor I said this. So that night, I call my sponsor at 9:30, and I say, hey, I ran into Jim F. He goes, you ran into Jim F? He goes, did he share today? I said, yeah, I heard him at a meeting. He said, let me tell you something. When that guy shares, he said, you stick your ears out like E.F. Hutton, and you hang on every word. I said, well, why is that? He said, because that man is good AA. Okay. Go to a few more meetings. I'd run into a guy named John H. I told my sponsor, John H. said he loves you. How you ran into John H.? He says, man, I'll tell you what, did that guy share? Yeah, he shared. Well, when he shares, you just follow everything he says. Why is that? Well, because that man is good AA. Well, you know, I got resentment now. So now I start running. I mean, clearly, all these guys that I'm running into, they have something that I don't. So I'm inferior to them, and I'm only telling on myself. So I would run into guys like Tom W., and he'd say, "Oh, tell your sponsor I said this." Sure, I will. I ain't gonna tell him nothing anymore. I stopped doing that. You know, after completing all the steps, it took a year. I did all the steps in a year. And like I said, I made the mistake of telling my sponsor, I'm really bored in AA. I've gone to all these meetings. I've done all this stuff. You know, man, I listened to the same stuff over and over. And he said to me, Ken, it's time to give back what was freely given. And what he wanted me to do, he wanted me to speak. He wanted me to do the steps. He wanted me to share. He wanted me to chair meetings. And listen to me. Let me tell you one little brief story. When my kids, I have two sons, when they were like 10 and 8, I wanted them to have some kind of a spiritual background. So I took them to this Protestant church. And we went there every Sunday, and they loved going to Sunday school. And I'd pick them up after Sunday school, and they'd beam, Look what I made, Daddy. Look, and they got its coloring and all that. And it was great. And I said to my wife, I said, this is pretty cool. I said, why don't we join this church? She goes, yeah, we can do that. So we go up to the pastor, and I tell him, this is like 6 weeks into this deal. So I go up to the pastor, and I says, hey, we'd like to join the church. He goes, oh, no problem. He said, next week, I'll just have you come up in front of the congregation, and you tell them what Jesus has done for you. Huh? I looked at my wife, I said, yeah, sure. You know what? I never went back. I swear to God, I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to get up in front of the... What am I going to tell them? She goes, "Won't you tell him something?" I said, "I am not getting up in front of a whole congregation of people." I said, "You can't." She goes, "Well, I'll get up." I said, "Well, you can't. They expect a man to be the spiritual guide in the family. I don't even have enough balls to stand up in front of the group." So I just couldn't do it. So I never went back. And lo and behold, here I am. I've been speaking. I'm going to tell you, I'm still nervous as hell. I don't know, you can't tell, but I sure am. This is not an easy deal to do, I can tell you right now. But it is fun. And I did tell myself when I stopped doing this, when it stops being fun, I don't want to do this anymore. So anyway, my sponsor told me to put my name in on the Alumni House list to do the steps. And I argued with him. I told him, I said, "What could I possibly say to anyone to change their life, man?" And he said, "Kent, I know at least one person whose life is going to change from you doing the steps." And I said, "Who?" He said, "It's going to be you." Oh man, jeez, I've sponsored 200 guys. I never come up with good, quick stuff like that. No matter what I do, that guy had an answer for everything. Then he puts his arm around me, and I'm like downtrodden. I'm like, I'm trying to find a way out of it. And he puts his arm around me and he says, "Kent, don't worry. You are going to do a great job." And I said, "Really?" I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Kent, because you're good AA." I said, "Oh, shit. Now he's got me. I still think that's the greatest compliment a person in Alcoholics Anonymous can get. I asked him if there was a format to do the steps. He said there wasn't any. He said, "Have fun with it and use your imagination." He says, "If you think you're boring, you are boring." He said, "Do something and use your imagination." Well, you're going to find out I've got an imagination. I told you that I learned by touching, seeing and listening, and I'd be bringing in all this stuff to emphasize a particular point. But you know what? Even the big book validates me using my imagination. On page 152, not 552, guys. Page 152 of the big book says that your imagination will be fired. And we're about to get there right now. So I'm going to start out with this. And I know I'm chewing up the clock, but I'm going to tell you, we're going to go on a journey in the next 12 weeks, and I hope you all hang in there with me. I'd like to start out by asking you to use your imagination to understand what I'm about to say next. Everything that we do is a matter of perspective, how we look at things in our life. We're a fellowship of broken people, but we weren't born that way. How many of us at any time in our lives, by a show of hands, how many of us have ever said to ourselves, "I'm a loser"? Everybody. We've all said that. Now let me tell you something. We're actually winners. Every single one of us are winners. Why? Not just for being at an alumni house, not just for being at this meeting. We're winners because we're alive. Let me explain. At the moment of our conception, when our mothers and fathers got together and they were doing the deal, out of the millions and millions of sperm swimming and fighting for that egg, we made it. Okay? Now I know that may sound a little silly, but think about it. I mean, look, when we're born, we have a clean slate, a new hard drive, clean tape. It's a white sheet of paper. Everybody loved us. We're lovable. They kiss us. They hug us. Nobody goes to a hospital at the baby ward and look down and says, "Yeah, he's a creep just like his dad." Nobody says that. But nobody looks at the little girl and goes, "She already looks like a hooker." Yeah. Nobody does that. So I say, what happened? What happened between the time we were born and now? Isn't that that's a justifiable question to me. Well, I'm going to tell you what happened to me. I believed the stuff that was programmed into me from people that taught me things. My family, my dysfunctional family. I was a mirror image of what they told me that I would be. I'd be no good like my father. It wasn't that I was no good like my father, but I felt like I was no good like my father. They told me I would never amount to anything. And I did amount to something, but I always thought in my mind, I'll always be less than. And so when I found drinking and drugging, it allowed me to escape all that mirror image phony stuff and to put it behind me and become someone I really wanted to be but couldn't be. But drugs and booze ran me to the ground, and I had a new problem. I couldn't function with the booze or without the booze. And then what happened, I entered the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there I found a treatment plan that allowed me to begin to clean the slate again. You guys had a program that allowed me to have a new hard drive, and that program was the 12 steps. You know, I want to say that we can all become winners again if we start with the first step. The first step is really simple. We just admit that we have a problem with brew. That's so simple. I told my sponsor I probably could do all the 12 steps in about 2 hours. And he said, yeah, you're probably right, but there's one thing that you couldn't do in 2 hours. He said, you can't live by the principles of these steps in 2 hours. And the principle of the first step is honesty and acceptance. And about as honest as I was, I'll tell you how honest I was. You know that moment when you wake up from a hangover, a real super bad night? Your mind kind of wakes up before your eyes do. You can hear things going on. The pots and pans are going on. You have no idea whether it's daylight, day, night, whatever. And you're just trying to mull over in your mind where you're coming from, where are you, what did you do? Just trying to piece it together. It's in those moments that I was most honest with myself, because I couldn't remember what I did. I couldn't remember what I said. My head was like this. My mouth was full of cotton, and I said to myself, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. And as soon as my eyes popped open, she would be right there to yell at me and tell me what an ass I made, and it would start all over again. I'd go back to the booze and the drugs, and I'd say, well, just one more time, I won't do it this way. The acceptance part, I admitted that I tell you, this admitting and acceptance, this is a big deal. I admitted that I might have a problem, but I didn't think it was alcohol. Now I'll tell you how crazy that is. In 1979, I went to my first AA meeting. Okay? And I bought a big book in 1975. Why did I buy a big book in 1975? Because I'm a how-to guy. I have a how-to book on everything under the sun. And somebody once said to me, you think you might have a drinking problem? Well, if I do, I got a big book. So when I did think it, I read a few pages. When I saw the word God, I said, I knew there's the fine print. There's the fine print. Been there, done that. Thank you very much. And just pushed it aside. So here I went to meetings in 79. I owned a big book. And now I'm in treatment. Get this now. I'm in treatment. The first day in treatment. We're going around in a circle. It's all us guys. I'm in detox. I don't even know who I am. And they're all got to say their name and their addiction. And it gets to me, and I looked at the lady and I said, I told her my name, and I said, I tell you the truth, I really have a problem telling you that I'm an alcoholic. She says, well, why is that? I said, well, because I'm not sure if that's really my problem. She goes, do you have any idea where you are? I said, yes, I'm in a hospital. She goes, well, what kind of a hospital are you in? So now my mind is catching up with my stupidity. And I realize that I'm looking like an idiot here. I said, you know what? I owned a big book. I went to AA meetings, and now I'm in an alcoholic treatment center. Chances are really good that I'm an alcoholic. And for the first time in my life, when I said that I am an alcoholic, and I heard verbally me say that, it was the first time in my life that I ever accepted the fact that I could never drink again. I knew it deep down inside. I knew that alcohol and drugs had kicked my butt. I tried to commit suicide. I ended up in treatment as an option. A psychiatrist sent me to treatment. She said you could always go back to plan A if plan B doesn't work. So give it a shot. So, how stupid is that? We we're going to a better life or we're going to die. Which way? And we go, well, let me think about it. You know, it's really insane. And if you're a person that's always at war with yourself, I heard a guy say this one time and he got my perfect attention. Because people always told me that I was a guy that's always at war with himself. And if you're a guy that's always at war with yourself, I'm going to tell you how to win that war. You surrender. Because no matter who wins, you lose. And speaking of surrender, I'm going to tell you something. I didn't know how to surrender. Nobody really told me how. I was dating a woman about a few years back, and she was not an alcoholic, which you're going to find out in a minute, because an alcoholic wouldn't come up with this. Now, I told her I needed a prop to do the first step. She goes, well, what would be a good prop? I said, well, first step is surrendering. You've got to completely surrender to this program. You've got to at least acknowledge that you got a drinking problem. And once you walk through those doors, completely surrender everything to the program. She says, well, I'll make you a surrender flag, a white flag. Well, you know, a week later, she comes up and she shows me this. Now, I got to tell you, man, and ladies, this is one hell of a surrender flag. I'm going to tell you right now, if you feel it, well, you felt it earlier. Is that a real flag? That is a multi-ply, heavy-duty, thick flag. This rope could hold your boat up to the mooring if you didn't already hawk it. All right? So I told her, I said, you know, that's a real good flag. I said, but you know, I figure if the United States went to war with France and we kicked their ass, this is the flag that they would use to surrender to us. This isn't exactly the kind of flag that I had in mind. I said, man, I need an AA flag, and I told her that I would always use this. Now, I'm going to tell you what I had in mind. Now, if I had this flag outside of Spofford Hall the night before I went in, let me tell you, I know I could have got $3 for it and went down and got another beer. I know that. Now let me tell you, if you got a flag like this, nobody's going to give you shit for this. And I want to tell you right now, if you feel like this, coming into AA, you got a shot. Well, I just want to bring you up to date. Now that's how I ended up doing the steps. I surrendered. I started doing the steps right here at Alumni House, and that was the beginning of a life for me that I would never expect. And they used to say, a life beyond my wildest imagination. I stand before you right now telling you that I have lived a life beyond my wildest imagination. And during the next 12 weeks, I'm going to explain to you how I went from grabbing a .38 to kill a couple of people to where I am today. And it all started, you know, my wet drunk, it was sort of like this. You know, my life was always unmanageable. When I was 5 years old, I lived in a big city. My first encounter with another human being, my very first encounter resulted in pain. I was 5 years old playing in a sandbox where I lived in the inner city, and we lived along these row houses, and I was playing in the sandbox, and I saw the teenagers coming down the alleyway, and when they reached me, I thought they were going to play with me. But one of them threw a firecracker down my shirt. And when the firecracker went off, I'm going to tell you, it felt like a stick of dynamite. And I went running across the street into the bar room where my mother and my stepdad were drinking. And I went running in there bloody murder. And my mother looked at my shirt and she says, I'll go back and play. You know, that isn't what I wanted. I wanted her to hug me and hold me and tell me that everything's going to be all right. I wanted her to go out there and I wanted somebody to go kick ass and make sure they're not going to come back. I wanted to feel secure. But no, I left that bar room like I left 1,000 other in my life. I felt lonely, insecure, full of fear, anxiety, and that's how I went through life, just like that. To this day, I'm 62 years old. I will not walk down the street. If I see a group of 4 or more people heading in my direction, I will cross the street. So, you know, what people have done to us early, we carry it through our life, and that's what happened to me. By the time I was 16 years old, I had been sexually abused. I lived in foster homes. I spent 30 days in a mental institution. I had seen numerous psychiatrists and psychologists, and to me, this was all normal. My mother and father were both alcoholics, although my stepfather was not. And if it wasn't for my stepfather, I honestly believe my mother would have been one of those mothers that killed all her kids. I didn't get along well with others. I was a guy that strictly stayed by myself. I've got enough time to just share a few things here with you. Growing up as a kid, we grew up with we watched Leave It to Beaver. Everybody, some of you young guys don't, but it was Ward, June Cleaver, Wally and the Beaver, Eddie Haskell, who's my favorite. The reason I mention it is because I want to distinguish between a normal family and a dysfunctional family. Now, a typical day in the Cleaver family, and by the way, now, we have 5 kids in my family. We used to sit there and roll, And by the way, I have never, ever in my life ever met a family that was normal like the Cleaver family. A typical day in the Cleaver family was here's June washing dishes with high heels, lipstick, hair made up, in a dress, and Beav and Lumpy walk in, and June says, "Oh, Beav and Lumpy, I just made a cake, and you have some milk and cake. Sit down there and have it." That's bullshit. Life isn't like that. When I grew up and I came home from after school, my mother would be stirring the spaghetti, and her hair would be in curlers. She'd have a butt hanging out of her mouth. She'd have dungarees on, and she'd look at me, and she said, "You better not grab anything before supper, or I'll whack you with a spatula." That was as good as it got for me. As a matter of fact, I had a younger brother, and never once did I ever pull a beef. "Oh, gee, Ralph, you look like you're down today, pal. What can I do for you?" Never. I was always trying to throw him under the bus. When I got caught, it was his fault, and when he got caught, it was my fault. What's funny? As you come in time, they had more dysfunctional families. The networks found out the more dysfunctional they are, the more entertainment people got. That's kind of funny. I remember one time in a wet drunk, I came home, I woke up in the morning completely naked. I couldn't find anything. It was January, snow on the ground and everything. I couldn't find my car keys, my coat, my shirt, nothing. So I grabbed all my extra stuff. I go out the door, and there, in the street, I live in the city. There outside my door, on my car, is my pants, my coat, my shirt, everything, in a blackout. How do you picture this? I must have opened up my door, stripped naked. And thank God my wife left the door open. I woke up in my bed. I want you to know that just once, I'd like to see Ward Cleaver get away with something like that. I'm going to tell you a couple of things briefly. I made it to Spofford Hall. It was a lot. There's a lot of things involved here that I could go into this long-ass drunk-a-log, but we all know where it took us, down to the bitter end. I tried committing suicide, and I stood outside the Spofford Hall, and it was 2:30 in the morning. I downed my last beer, and I want to let you know the state of my mind. And if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to tie this together. Okay? There was the editor of Elle magazine, okay? He had a stroke. And when he woke up, the only thing that he could move was his left eyelid. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I stopped and I said, at that moment, I would be praying for someone to do the right thing for me and pull the plug. Any way you can. That was my first reaction. But not this guy. This guy wrote a book while one blink at a time. He conveyed to his secretary one blink, one letter, and he wrote the book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And I was so taken, I said, what could this man have to say? And this book is about him blinking one word at a time, telling about his affliction and that he can't move and what's going on in his mind. Amazing. Now, why do I mention that? Well, I want you to know that outside the doors of Spofford Hall, I had a wife, I had children, I had money in the bank, I had a car, and I had a job. I would have given all of it up to have the one thing that this man had that I didn't, and that was a sense of purpose. The only thing that kept this man going is he wanted to write a book, and he did it. And I had no sense of purpose. You could have all the money in the world, but once you lose yourself, you've got nothing. And the last thing that I'm going to close up with tonight is with this. I know that we read how it works. We read it every meeting. Well, I got a story that involves that, and this is how it really works. When my first year of sobriety in this 96, I came in, and during this first 3 to 4 months, I'm going, the men's group puts on a meeting at the service center downtown. Now these guys come in right off the street, and so I go down there every Wednesday, and like 3 or 4 months into the deal, a guy stops me from the men's group, and he says to me, "Kent, you mind if I ask you a personal question?" I says, "No, go ahead." He goes, do you own any clothes?" Look, I got running shorts on. I got a running shirt on. I said, "Yeah, man, I own clothes. Why?" He said, "Man, I hate to tell you this, but it looks like you're wearing the same clothes all the time." I said, "Thanks for sharing." And they're like, "Hey, you don't understand, man." I said, "This isn't the same clothes I had on yesterday." I said, "See, I'm a runner. I have 100 pairs of shorts. I got 100 shirts. I got summer beaches run, winter beaches run. I have all the shirts." He says, "Kent, that's fine." So look, man, you do what you want, but I'm just telling you that you look like you wear the same clothes every day. So now, I go into this meeting. Now, here these guys are right off the street. Am I concerned about what they say? No, I'm concerned about what they look like. I'm looking at these guys and say, none of them have running shorts on. I said, they're all in jeans. They got shirts on. So I felt out of place at the service center. I didn't feel a part of. So now that Friday, I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to the mall, and I'm gonna go buy some clothes. She goes, "You're kidding." I said, "No, I'm going to go." So I go and I spend $500 on clothes. I come back, Monday night men's meeting. I'm all dressed up in my new clothes. I start going out the door, and my wife says to me, she goes, where are you going?" I says, "I'm going to an AA meeting." She goes, "Like that?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, why would you go to an AA meeting with all your new clothes?" So I told her about this guy. And she looks at me and goes, "You're kidding me." She goes, Brandy and I have been telling you that for 10 years. All of a sudden, you go to an AA meeting, and some drunk tells you that you need clothes, and then you go out and get clothes. Now that, my friends, is how